Salam.
Jam.
Shanti.
We all want the same thing.
Peace.
And Rotary clubs
Sola.
are making it happen. Through international scholarships to promote peace around the world. Rotary. Humanity in motion.
I think that it's going to be interesting. For the first time in the history of the state, we do have a legislature that is controlled by the Republican Party. And a lot of the initiatives that the Republican Party has touted as being good for Oklahoma will be at the forefront of the agenda for this particular session. Things like workers' comp reform, tort reform, things of that nature. And education reform as well. And so I think that it's going to be a learning process. I personally have a good relationship. Feel like I have a good relationship with Governor Henry, and feel like that he has historically been bipartisan and good to work with members of both parties on the issues. And so I think that the key to this session is going to be including everyone and doing the work at the front end of the issue to really sit down at the table when we start discussing the details of the issues that are going to be a priority, and making sure that everybody's ideas and input is included on the front end. And I think that if we do that, I think that we'll be fine, and I think that we can move Oklahoma ahead. Well, I hope so. I think that water should be a top priority of the legislature this session. About 2 years ago, we actually passed and appropriated money for a comprehensive water plan to be conducted for the state of Oklahoma to determine how we can best utilize the water that exists within our state. And we're about 2 years, maybe 3 years into that project right now. The legislature also, in the year 2000, I believe, 2001, actually passed a moratorium on the sale of water, sale of out-of-state, the out-of-state sale of water to places like Texas and other states. And that moratorium is currently being challenged in federal court. And based on the information that I've received early on, it may be that the moratorium could be ruled unconstitutional before the comprehensive water plan is completed. And that's very concerning, because if a federal court determines that it's illegal to place a moratorium on the sale of water, and another state can make a valid case for utilizing the water that we have in Oklahoma at the federal level, then the federal government might trump state government in regards to the utilization of water within a certain area beyond just a given state. And so I think it's very important that we have a plan in place to justify utilizing the water that we have in Oklahoma for Oklahomans. And I hope that we can kind of speed up the comprehensive water plan and get that study completed so that we can protect and keep the resources that belong in Oklahoma. Well, and that's another question, because it depends on where the water, which lake or reservoir or area the water comes out of. And it could be that if it's a tribal entity, for instance, that owns the rights to the water, then they could be buying it from a tribe within Oklahoma, and the state wouldn't, obviously as a whole, wouldn't necessarily benefit from that. If it's a city or a town or a county that owns the rights to the water, then it could benefit just one small area of the state and not the state entirely. So it's a good question, and there's a lot of controversy over exactly who would get paid and who would be able to actually sell water if that became a scenario. It could, and those kind of questions need to be answered. I mean, those kind of questions need to be answered before any. I think that they need to be answered right away before we'd even have a discussion. And because it becomes so convoluted, if it's a federal government that would benefit from the sale of water, if it's the state of Oklahoma, if it's a local entity within the state of Oklahoma, or if it's a tribe within the state of Oklahoma, I don't think that anybody has a clear answer on exactly who in a given situation would benefit from a transaction like that. So I think that those kind of questions need to be answered first and foremost. Probably judicially at this point, because the state legislature would be one of several sovereign entities that would be making a case for its own position. And given that scenario, it would be like the state legislature against the federal legislature against a tribal nation, all of which are sovereign entities. And so ultimately, I think it's a federal court that decides those kind of questions. Yes, sir. I think the order of the day is for Oklahoma to have a plan that justifies the utilization of the water resources we have in our state. And we know that we have an abundant supply of water in southeastern Oklahoma, probably more, and I am from southeastern Oklahoma, but we have an abundant supply in that area of the state, probably more than that area needs. But we don't have an adequate or stable source within the central and western parts of our state, and so in order to develop a plan that would help us distribute the water from the area of the state where it's in abundance to the areas of the state that is lacking is I think something that's very necessary in order for us to potentially keep that stable source of water for generations to come.